Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, and today we're doing a VCT Americas preseason power ranking. So what is the power ranking? Essentially, it is a list of where I think these teams stand in comparison to one another. The kickoff bracket isn't really being taken into consideration here because this is just where I think these teams stand, and the bracket, definitely will be different from how these rankings turn out. I will be updating these throughout the season, but for now we are doing a preseason power ranking, so where I see these teams in comparison to one another going into the season. We will be going from last to first, so starting off the list, we have MIBR at 11. MIBR kept most of the core, but they brought in Artisan and Mazine, and I just don't know if I see those two players dragging this team out of the bottom row. I just think with the high amount of talent in the Americas, just MIBR's, their roster, just I don't think it really compares and can really be competitive against any other roster really, but hey, I could be wrong. Next up at number 10, we have Evil Geniuses. So I tried to think of a reason to put Evil Geniuses higher than 10th, but I really just couldn't. Looking at the roster, it looks really bad on paper. I do think Potter is going to get more wins out of this team than any coach could, but I don't think that the good coaching and probably strong play from Giacomo is really going to drag this team out of 10th spot. I definitely see them being a bottom two team. Again, they have a good coach. They have some talent there. It doesn't look like the worst roster ever, but it definitely doesn't look like a roster that's going to be competitive. So let's all be surprised when they win kickoff and then make it to Madrid. I am dreading when that happens. It just seems like a situation that's too funny not to happen, but I digress. Moving on to number 9, we have Furia. Furia is another Brazilian team. I felt kind of bad putting 2 of the 3 Brazilian teams in the bottom 3, but again, just looking at Furia, I just don't know if the changes that they made really make the roster that they already had better. MW0 is a very good player, as a person in my comment section on my season preview of Furia so graciously pointed out, saying that he, quote, clears any other duelist aside from Demon 1 and Aspas in the Americas, which that's a bold statement. Not sure if I agree with that, but hey, he could be right. But at the same time, aside from them, I don't know if I really see a lot there that's going to drag them out of 9th place. Sorry, Brazil. That's just how it goes, but we'll get to your other team later. Moving on to number 8. This one might surprise people. This is basically the section of this power ranking where I really had trouble figuring out where to place teams, because there's arguments for some of these teams being able to be top 5, even some being able to be top 3, but ultimately I have Cloud9 at 8th. Cloud9's roster does not look particularly bad, but at the same time, it doesn't look particularly good either. They bring back Vanity, who is a good IGL. Oxy should be a solid duelist player for him. Whippy, sure, but at the same time, I just look at the rest of the roster and I just kind of think, meh. Zeppa's a good player, so is Jakey. He had a good season last year, but I still see a lot of the pieces that just couldn't really go far last year. And while some people have this team top 5 in the Americas, I just don't know if I could justify it over other teams. Moving on to number 7, we have Crew. So Crew is an interesting team. They went winless during the regular season, and then they won all of LCQ, and then they went winless at Champions again. So there is an argument to be made that this team probably should have made more changes than they ended up making. Unfortunately, some of the changes were forced upon them by the passing of Davies, but the players that they brought in Shai and Emta, or however you say his name, I think someone corrected me, but I don't remember right now. I do think that those changes are solid ones. And Kesnet is still there, and while there is criticism to be levied at Kesnet and the fact that he hasn't been able to take this team super far in the long time that he's been a part of this team, at the same time, this man had 1.16 KD ratio on a team that went winless. Like, he's a really good player. He might be one of the more underrated players in the entire VCT, and I do think that he's tired of losing. And while I couldn't really justify putting this team in the top 5, I do think that they have some decent pieces here that should be able to make a decent run. Moving on to number 6, if you're a fan of this team, you're probably wondering why you weren't there yet. 100 Thieves. That's right, I have Cloud9 over 100 Thieves. Yes, I know Cloud9 beat them in Ludwig x Terek, but Boostio had been on the team for like 4 days, so I'm going to let it go. And I'm also probably one of the people that really isn't taking off-season results into much consideration, some consideration, but not as much as I see, Plat Chat doing, mainly just because I feel like off-season events are mainly there to help these players get acclimated with the roster changes and to really practice. I don't see any team dominating in the offseason a really good indication on how they're going to do during the VCT, which we'll get to that with the team that you're probably thinking of when it comes to offseason results. But honestly, I think the changes that 100 Thieves made were really good, and I think they're going to be a solid team. You still have Cryo, who had a down year last year, but still ended the year with a 1.07 in the KD ratio department. You have Asuna, who, yes, maybe has not reached the full potential that he can reach, but he still is a solid player. Bang is a really good smokes player. I don't think we should really sleep on him. He's really good in the clutch, and he should continue to be good and improve on his play. EU as an addition doesn't really excite me too much, but at the same time, if he improves that initiator role, then that should be a good idea. And then you have Boostio, the IGL, who I think is really going to put a lot of energy into this team. It already looks like he's fitting in. Obviously, during Ludwig and Tarek, he wasn't really performing super well, but again, he had been on the team for like 4 days, but he really believes in this roster, as we've seen from some 100 Thieves content, and I think he knows what he's talking about, and I think he's going to get this team motivated and could upset during the kickoff tournament. Moving on to number 5, we have the Ascension team G2. So G2 is a team that I feel like I'm much higher on than other people. You know, Plat Chat wasn't too high on them. Thinking Man's Valorant did have them actually above me. I'm not going to say his rankings because I don't want to spoil his video for anybody that wants to go watch it. But I feel like 5th is a fair place to put G2. This is a team that was, you know, on the guard. They had the guard roster, and they looked very good during Tier 2. They win Ascension, and before that in 2022, they looked like one of the best teams in North America overall. They started the year in 2022 looking very good, qualifying for Masters rank fit that year, and then unfortunately didn't win a match during that tournament. But I think back then it was evident that this team wasn't really experienced. They had some really young players, but now they have the experience and they've won Ascension. They've proven that they can beat teams that on paper are better than them. M80 was arguably the best team in Tier 2, but the guard ended up beating them, and now that G2 has this roster, they have the same roster. They've just switched out Tex with Leaf, who I absolutely feel is an underrated player, because Leaf had a very good year on Cloud9 last year, was one of the best players in Americas. So if you take that roster and just add Leaf to it, I think that's a recipe for success, and I think that is absolutely a top 5 roster in the Americas. Okay, so now we get to the top 4. Now the top 4 is very interesting. So we have 4 teams left on the board that you could make arguments for any of them being number 1, any of them being number 2, 3, 4. So what did I end up going with? So if you're a Seminoles believer, you're probably like, why are we number 1? Why are we at least number 2? I see a lot of people putting them in those tiers. Listen, I know Seminoles looked really good in the offseason. My worry with them is a couple things. First off, they might have played too much in the offseason, and they might have already given teams enough footage to prep off of them. It's not guaranteed that Tens has a good year. Yes, he now is playing a different role. He's playing controller, and he's looking like he's comfortable on it. But at the same time, does that end up working out in the long run? It's not guaranteed. John QT, yes, he looks like he is exactly what this team needed on the IGL position, but he was a Tier 2 player last year. Does it take time for him to adjust to Tier 1? Zalsis, great addition, great energy guy. Does he struggle a bit? And do we see Pancata get into matches because Zalsis doesn't end up doing so well? Does Saucy struggle again? I definitely think when you look at this team and you look at how they've been talking and prepping in the offseason, this team looks like they are ready to go on an amazing run and not only be one of the best teams in the Americas, but also be one of the best teams in the world contending for championships. But am I there yet? Do I think that they could be that? I don't know. You know, looking at Thinking Man Valorant's video, he said that he felt like if Zekken doesn't have a good game, then the rest of the team might falter. I don't know if I agree with that, mainly just because I feel like they do have enough firepower overall to absorb one other player struggling. And while I do think Zekken is their best player and is one of the best duelists in the Americas, I think they'll be fine if he struggles. But my main concern with this team is that they're just coming in with such high expectations. What if the pressure gets to them? What if when they start losing matches or, you know, they lose a couple rounds here and there, do they just collapse? I think they have the mindset now to have that not happen, but it could happen. Expectations are very high. It's just kind of insane that this team went from a bottom 4 team in the Americas last year, and then they switch out 2 players, and now all of a sudden they're top 3 for some people, top 2, top 1. I just can't give them that big of a jump yet. Again, I will be updating these power rankings throughout the season, so we'll see where they end up later in the season. But for now, I think 4th is a comfortable spot for them. Moving on to number 3, we have Leviathan. So Leviathan is a team that I also have a lot of question marks about, and I mainly put them above Sentinels because when I just looked at the rosters one for one, it just felt like Leviathan overall had better talent than Sentinels. They have Aspas, who is one of the best players in the entire world. They have Calm, who just won a world championship. They have Kane, who had an amazing season last year, definitely very underrated. Mazzino should continue to be a good smokes player for them, but is the Tex edition really as good as some people are making it out to be? Basically, they've brought in Aspas, who is one of the best players in the world, especially when it comes to the duelist role, and then they bring in Tex, who plays the same position. I know in the offseason he's been playing a bit of Sentinel here and there, but they also have been running some double duelist comps, so I don't know if that as a composition is particularly viable. And for me, it just kind of feels like they're in a similar position to Sentinels coming into 2023, where they build a roster that is, a mixture of people that have won in certain levels of the game, but they're also all from different parts of the world. Maybe the language barrier ends up being a problem. I know they're going to come in English, and I don't exactly know the English level of Aspas, but it could end up being a struggle. And when it comes to Calm and the controversy of switching out Nosworth for him, is Calm really an improvement on Nosworth? Not knocking Calm, but I definitely think that the expectations for some of the people that were on the EG roster last year, I think the expectations for some of them are definitely a bit high. Calm going into Champions, I don't think he was seen in the same way that he is seen now. There was an argument to be made that Calm was the worst player on the Evil Geniuses roster before Champions. Not saying that he was bad in any way, because he wasn't, but with that collection of very talented players and just how his stats were going into Champions, there was that argument. And then in Champions, he just turns it on. He just becomes a monster. He's a clutch machine during Champions. I don't know if we're going to see him do that again. I don't know if he has it in him to continue to do that. So I do hope he does, but we will see. I have questions surrounding Leviathan, so I don't think I can put them higher than 3, but I think 3 is a comfortable spot for now. So the top 2, who takes number 2? Who takes number 2? And obviously that will, make it known who is number 1. So let's start with number 2. Number 2 is Energy. So Energy, I want to put them at number 1. I think they absolutely have the talent to be considered number 1, but there are some questions about this roster that I have that maybe just makes me not be able to put them at number 1. Talent-wise, they're stacked. Victor, Crashies, Demon 1, Marved, Ethan, fantastic bunch of talent. I don't think they're going to have a lot of troubles when it comes to character composition. I did when I first saw the roster, but then looking at these players' character lists, I definitely saw where they have some flexibility. They still have Chet, who's a great coach. Crashies and Victor should follow up their solid 2023 with a solid 2024. They haven't had a lot of time, and we haven't seen this roster play. And the word is that the scrims haven't been going very well, and that might be an issue. Is, you can build a super team, and on paper it can be a super team, but does it end up gelling? And that's just something that we don't know yet, so I can't put them at number 1 because of that, because I don't know how this team is going to do, because we just haven't seen them yet. But I think just based off of the talent that they have, and just on paper how it looks, yeah, they're top 3, and I put them at number 2, which of course means that Loud takes number 1. So this requires some explaining. So Loud is a team that people are definitely quite down on, and I understand why. They not only lost Aspas, who was their best player by a long shot, but they also lost their coach in Fraud. They have a new head coach. So how could I make an argument for them being number 1? Losing arguably the best player in the world, obviously that's going to be a huge hit to your roster, so how can you make the argument that they're going to be as good? My thing with Loud is that I trust Sadak so much, and ultimately they just lost one player. It is an insanely good player, but they just lost one player. They bring in Quick. I don't think Quick is going to be a world beater by any means, but I think this team is going to adjust and is going to be very dominant in the Americas. Seeing some of the pick'ems that have had this team going out early, going out in groups, I'm like, are you serious? Like, again, I know they lost Aspas and they're in the group of death and all that, but do you really see Loud not making every international this year? Is that really something that you can look me in the eye and tell me you think is going to happen? I just think they're going to be there. I think an international tournament without Loud First off, that'd be just a shame, but it also just doesn't seem like something that is going to happen. Yes, they haven't played in the offseason, but to me, that kind of scares me, because now we don't know what adjustments they've made. They've been waiting in the shadows. They've been waiting for their chance to attack, and everybody has been downplaying how good this team is, and everybody has just been saying that this team is not going to be, better than Sentinels or Energy or Leviathan or any of these teams. Most people do have them in the top 5. Yes, top 4 is usually what I've been seeing for them, but I still think this team is going to be the best team in the Americas. It just seems like everybody's downing them. Now they're coming in as the underdog. Is there really anything more scary than Loud as an underdog? I don't really think there is. So these are my VCT Americas preseason power rankings. As I said, I will be updating them throughout the year. You'll probably see the next one before the regular season split. I'll probably do one for the Madrid teams, but that'll be including the other regions, so stay tuned for that. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. I'm sure everybody is going to agree with my picks here, but if by some chance you disagree, let me know in the comment section down below why you disagree. Let me know what your rankings are, and please click like if you enjoyed the video. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.